Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Now that my two obligatory informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And I was looking through some of the other YouTubers this morning and I came across ScottHermanFitness doing a video about a chest routine. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my craft in a little bit, and let's talk about this. And I think it's interesting that you've got Scott lately, even though Scott has more or less admitted that full body training probably really is the way to go. He's doing all these little silly individual routines again, and it's somewhat of a disappointment. Now, Scott has come in before and gotten angry, and he's like, why are you giving me such a hard time? And it's like, well, it's pretty straightforward, Scott, because you're a guy who does actually know a lot about training. You actually do have the knowledge, you do have the background, and you put out, like 70 to 80% really good information. But that other 20% is just garbage, fluff and pump, and bro junk and a waste of time. And so I think at a certain point, we need people who are kind of pointing out the differences here. When we have these really big fitness YouTubers who have the potential to do good, it seems like a lot of times they do market a lot of little silly stuff just because they know that there's an audience for it and they know they can make money off of that. And that's fine. I mean, I'm all about making money off YouTube. I mean, I get it, I understand. But we do have an obligation to put out good information. And I kind of think when we start coming over to, oh, it's a quick 30-minute chest workout, we're getting ridiculous, because even Scott knows better than that. He knows that stimulating your chest effectively multiple times a week with big exercises really is the key, and then coming in sometimes on your weak points with smaller exercises. But I wouldn't do it the way that he did it here, wouldn't necessarily be the way I'd recommend people go about it if that's a weak point for them. So the whole point we get into is, yeah, I understand it was meant to be just a quick chest workout, 30 minutes in and out, but I mean, that's not really a good use of your gym time. Where I will give credit, his dumbbell bench press form was immaculate. And why is that a big deal? Why is that a big deal? Because most people do it wrong. Most people, particularly big, stupid-ass bodybuilders, do dumbbell work for their chest in a way that causes injury, causes pec tears, causes rotator cuff injuries, and doesn't even really give you the benefits of a dumbbell chest press. Scott did it correctly, and he pointed out, he's like full range of motion all the way down and all the way up, because again, range of motion affects muscle stimulation. In fact, when you look at the data on it, even if doing a longer range of motion forces you to reduce the weight, it usually stimulates more muscle growth. In other words, trimming range of motion down to lift a heavier weight actually in the studies oftentimes causes a little less muscle growth, believe it or not, because you're not getting more mechanical tension, which is a point he touches on, mechanical tension being one of the growth stimulators. Well, mechanical tension is created by sometimes the joint angles we create. In other words, the heaviest weight we can lift through our hardest joint angle, where the most tension is put on the muscle, is actually where a lot of that mechanical tension comes into play. So it's something that you have to think about. He goes all the way down. A lot of guys, they stop short at the bottom. And the other thing, you notice a slight turning in of the hands. Like he didn't have his pinkies flared out. He didn't flare. He was tucked a little bit. All right, that is actually the correct way to do a dumbbell press. People say, why? So that you remove that internal rotation of the shoulder so that you don't hurt your rotator cuffs. That flaring out that guys do, and they turn that pinky out instead of down in, right? Talking about supination versus pronation of the wrist. You want to have a slight supination. You don't want to be fully pronated on any sort of chest press. You don't want to do it. I mean, bench is different because you can tuck and you can move the bar path down. But when you use dumbbells the way he's doing it, it happens automatically when you turn them in. When you turn them in a bit, it brings it lower to the chest automatically, and it puts you through a safer spot where you remove that internal rotation. So I do want to give credit for that because most guys mess that up, and Scott actually had the form perfect, and he went all the way down, locked out at the top, full range of motion. He did the exercise correctly. Now, me personally, I would throw a barbell bench press in instead, or a weighted dip if I really was trying to stimulate maximum growth when he's talking about mechanical tension. But, you can do it with dumbbells, just not my preferred tool. But he did do the exercise correctly, and so I do want to give the credit for that. All right, I want to give credit for that. The problem I had, though, was the fact that everything was about doing like what he called a giant set. And he was also talking about trying to get all three of these growth stimulators. Well, the third one of those is actually subject to debate. There's a lot of experts who think that third one that you mentioned, Scott, doesn't actually do anything. And I know that's your current bag. You're talking about mechanical tension, metabolic fatigue, and muscular damage, right? That's what you're talking about is the three growth stimulators. The problem is that that third one is extremely hypothetical, and there are plenty of PhDs and researchers in the field who do not think that it matters. In fact, there's even some data suggesting it's completely irrelevant and not even a factor. But we do know that mechanical tension and metabolic fatigue are the two big ones. But you know, the metabolic fatigue is a product of volume, and mechanical tension is a product of weight on the bar versus joint angle. The thing is, you can get both of those just by doing more volume with heavy work. But the other thing to think about there is that he has you throwing it all into one workout. And I'm sorry, that doesn't give you the best use of your time. What I mean is, if you're wanting to have a focus on mechanical tension versus metabolic fatigue, usually that's where concurrent periodization comes in. In other words, we have a really heavy day and a volume day for any given muscle, and you rotate through them, because what you find is that there is slightly different recovery pathways involved between those two things if you focus heavily on one. And what you find is that when you have greatly mixed rep ranges in the same workout, you can't replicate your performance as often. That's the reason concurrent periodization was devised for more advanced lifters, right? That's the reason it was devised, is because it could actually increase your total training frequency while being able to replicate performance. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing sets of 3 or 5 for really high volume, or even doing just really high reps to create that metabolic fatigue compared with your max effort days. It's just generally been found that your total training volume and frequency goes up when you separate the two. In other words, if you do really, really heavy work and then a lot of really light back off work in the same workout, you end up being able to do less total work for the week because the recovery between the two is different. And if you stagger them on different days, you get a little better results. So I don't usually recommend most people do mixed phase training in the same day, and most experts agree with that. And the problem we get to, people say like, well, that's really only for advanced lifters. The problem is Scott doesn't have advanced lifters in his audience. Let's be honest here. The majority of who he's preaching to, I guarantee you the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of Scott's audience haven't built a base yet. I can assure you that 90+% of his people are novice lifters. And a lot of his guys are saying, I'm not a novice, I've been training X amount of time. I'm like, well, how much can you squat? How much can you bench press? And I don't even mean your max. What about your work sets? You're telling me that, you know, you're doing sets of 5 with 185 on the bench and doing sets of 5 with 225 on the barbell squat? Yeah, you're not even close to being an advanced lifter. You're not even in the ballpark, all right? You're still a noob. And the problem is that noobs need to focus primarily on mechanical tension. You know, all this extra fluff in these giant sets, it's not going to work. What do we know stimulates growth as far as break times? Dr. Brad Schoenfeld's done a great amount of research on this, and he's found, and he's all about bodybuilding. He doesn't even care about performance. All he cares about is muscle growth. He's Dr. Gaines. He's found in his research that you get more muscle growth with longer breaks. Longer breaks between sets stimulates more muscle growth. In fact, if you only have 30 minutes, you might want to just do 4 really heavy sets and get out. So if you were to ask me, what should someone do to get into the gym in 30 minutes if they just wanted to train their chest? I'm like, well, I wouldn't just train the chest. I'd do multiple exercises, but something like a bench press and then a standing press. Come in and do multiple really heavy sets, 3 to 4 minutes between them. Squeeze as many of those in as you can and get out. The beauty of that is that when you switch over to the strict standing press, you're already warmed up from the bench press. That's what I would recommend, or weighted dip and then overhead press. You know, that was the problem. You know, he had these different movements involved, and then he throws in a pullover at the very end, which to me is a waste of time. And the reason I say that, all the benefits that you're getting out of doing these pullovers, you get from dead hang weighted pull-ups and chin-ups, right? Which everyone should be doing. Those should be your finishing movement to finish off the chest. And here's what I would say to the majority of his audience: all of this fluffing he did and the cable flies and all stuff is a waste of time. If you build a base on the bench press, the strict standing press, just called the press, and weighted pull-ups, you're going to have a fully developed big chest if you build a base on those 3 exercises. So if someone were to ask me, for any of his audience, these noobs, how do we build a big chest on them? Let's get their bench up to 300 pounds. Let's get their press up to 200 pounds. Let's get their weighted pull-up up to 90 or 100 pounds. And I would try to get them there as quickly as possible, injury-free. That's what's going to build a big, thick chest. All right? You show me any guy who can hit all 3 of those numbers who has no chest, doesn't have a big, thick chest. It's going to be extremely rare. That's going to be a rare individual who can do all 3 of those things and still doesn't have chest development. So again, this was really a lot of wasted time. It was a lot of fluff in there. And I know that Scott knows better than this. Scott knows that getting guys strong on a big, basic, full body routine is really what's going to fix their chest issues. He knows that because he's even started training that way himself, and he started doing the whole full body thing when he realized, yeah, this really does work best for naturals. It really does. He knows it. He's admitted it. He's been doing it. But then he's still going to throw in these little silly fluff like this because there's going to be an audience who doesn't want to work hard and they just think a little shortcut, silly, giant set exercise is going to get them the results when all the data and the evidence suggests otherwise. Problem is too short of breaks, kind of wasteful, crappy exercises that don't fit into your overall scheme of things as far as just building overall size and mass on you. And the fact of the matter is it's too much mixed training in one workout. That's going to interfere with your training for the rest of the week. You really need to focus on individual performance elements in each workout and not mix them. Come back on a different day if you want to do real high rep or high volume work than your heavier days. You really do need to separate that mechanical tension from metabolic fatigue if you're trying to maximize your training response in one day. So a lot of this was just kind of silly. But again, I will give credit. Those dumbbell presses were performed correctly, and that is, believe it or not, an extremely rare thing to see on YouTube. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.